If Biden wants to unite the country, one thing is clear: dump the corporate lobbyists.
It's clear, then, that while Biden will have his work cut out for him if he wants to win the support of Republican voters, working to close the revolving door with his cabinet picks is far more likely to accomplish this than choosing business magnates for key roles. What is wrong with these moderates that imagine that the folks on the right are as moderate as them? We are seeing Trump and conservatives mount an amateur coup, threaten violence, shut down state capitals, and they still trot out the idea that anti-corporatism will bring back these conservatives. It's good advice to dump corporate lobbyists, and more importantly pro-corporate policies, but you're right that 90% of Trump voters will not care. There are surely some schmucks out there who heard Trump's protectionist rhetoric and could be won over by concrete policies that have an immediate positive impact on their lives, likely at the expense of the biggest corporations or wealthiest elites. But even then, corporate coddling is so ingrained in so much of the schmuck culture that they often rush to the defense of the wealthy and manipulative. Biden and Democrats need to deliver something tangible and immediate to people's lives, and they need to make sure their branding is all over it. None of this, "It's called Obamacare" on Fox, ACA on CNN, and KY necked in your particular state nonsense. Well, currently Republican voters think Biden is literally a Chinese puppet who is going to start a war with America by China, throw Trump, themselves, and everybody they love into a work camp where they are slaves to China while the country gets completely taken over by China and turned into a communist country while hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops move into the capital from Canada via Trudeau, who is also a puppet for China after having stolen Trump's second of 3 or 4 presidential terms through Venezuelan voting machines created by Hugo Chavez that were designed specifically to steal elections. And after Trump was no longer president, it was time to put another Trump into office, which means the best way to win the support of Republican voters is to dump the corporate lobbyists. Please. It's all about money and taxation, and where and how it's spent, simple as that. With our supercomputing, every cent can and should be tracked. The phrase here and from the dawn of man, money talks. On rare occasions it's different. I can think of 2, Gandhi and Mother Teresa. It never changes. The rich need the poor and in fact aim to keep it that way. For the life of me, we don't have a simple taxing system that works. A clean system. Any person below, say, 25,000 should get a tax handout. Anyone making less than 50,000 shouldn't pay. Then a gradual scale up into 33% for above 50,000. A separate contribution from every person, scaled accordingly, to specifically pay off the national department. Corporations must contribute as well. And for God's sakes, cut out the loopholes and corporate handouts. Keep it simple. Stupid applies here. Our current taxing keeps the rich, rich and the poor, poor. Enough. I've been getting downvoted for saying Biden and the Dems should raise the minimum wage, do something for the workers. I'm also getting told that progressives didn't help win the election, so neoliberalism should go on unrestrained. WTF? Is this yet another example of people who want some meaningful reforms to help the working poor people, are getting told to get fucked? Why do people hate workers so much? I don't get it. Don't workers deserve dignity? Even if the Democrats get the Senate, the prevailing wisdom is that a $15 per hour minimum wage designed to roll out in 2026 is just a maybe? Really FFS. The Democrat establishment and middle class seem to be taking workers for suckers. Why not? I suppose. I'm the wrong side of 50 and the working poor never get a look in, never. They will want votes again in 2 years' time, and again the working poor will be told, just vote us in, things will change. They have gone backwards for the last 40 fucking years. Aren't people getting tired of being lied to? I despise the GOP, so please spare me, the lesser of two evils shit. The thing is that the Democrats will never have to do a thing as long as they always have the title of not being Republicans. We're in a constant bind, and the Democrats will never actually believe they should win over voters. You don't vote for them and they will complain and blame the voters themselves instead of coming up with a platform that energizes voters and meets needs. Voter turnout diminishes, a Republican wins, people vote back to Democrat out of desperation, and after the entire internet moralizes for 4 years about how horrible everyone who doesn't support these ghouls are because it made way for Republicans. At this point I don't believe the working class will ever win unless we organize, unionize and rebuild actual power that we can leverage. Power won't concede without a demand. And right now, labor is not a demand. It's charity at best until we can be coordinated enough to withdraw our contribution to the economy at will. Until then, expect nothing more than absolutely nothing unless it's an optics game. Funny how the federal minimum wage never gets indexed for inflation, huh? It can get completely out of whack and become a voting issue for one party, and on the other side they fight against it for money and votes from business owners using lots of minimum wage workers benefit until it's raised in their states. It needs to be raised to whatever level and then indexed for inflation. Then, helping the workers can mean something more than increasing the minimum wage. Like they'd actually have to go for universal healthcare perhaps. Instead, political capital and voters' attention is focused on something that is kept open as an issue by both parties for their own ends. Lot of Democratic voters that make something more than minimum wage that would benefit from future political capital spent elsewhere. I think people need to remember that corporate lobbyists are a part of what Biden and most Democrat politicians see as the normal way of doing things, which is basically what they campaigned on. This is why people swept up in the euphoria of Biden winning need to remember that this is not the end point. It must only be a start in eliminating Trumpism and overhauling America. It would be so easy to neuter the Trump movement with some basic but potent policy reforms that take the boot off of people's necks just a little bit and allows them to actually experience tangible benefits to their lives by voting Dem. M4A, legalized weed, mandated family leave, paid vacation, and a $15 federal minimum wage would make Dems the overwhelming favorite party for at least the foreseeable future given the public opinion trajectory on all of those issues. Democrats should establish strict rules of ethics around engaging with corporate lobbyists, but because it's the right thing to do. Not because it's somehow going to allow us all to unify with the party that engaged in insider stock trading in the midst of a pandemic that's killed 300,000 Americans. It's bullshit arguments like this that create the space for Republicans to not lift a damn finger for the people while blaming Democrats in the process. Enough. Everyone is like, Biden is going to have to do this. Biden is going to have to do that. As if Biden isn't a crook himself. I pity people who think Biden is going to improve on this country in any form since Obama left. I'm fairly sure most people who know who he is voted for him entirely on the notion that he at least knows politics and might be able to take us away from the edge of the cliff that Trump was so joyfully driving us towards. Corporate lobbyists need to go, but anyone who knows Biden knows he isn't going to be the one who does that. I am honestly okay with Biden just acting as a stopgap to try and restore the gov to some level of function after Trump. Don't get me wrong, I wish he was more progressive, but it'll take the win we got, and hopefully we ramp up the pressure and don't just relax and let it off BCO a Dems in charge now. None of this debate of what Biden can actually do to improve the country matters anyway unless we find a way to win the Senate and gain seats in 2022. While I agree with the headline, we need to understand that Biden is a tried and true neolib, meaning that his policy will benefit the professional class, i.e. lobbyist, rather than the working class. Dems abandoned the working class after McGovern, and Biden is a product of this. He said it himself, nothing will fundamentally change, when speaking to a group of wealthy donors. While I understand the excitement of narrowly escaping fascism, we have still not rid ourselves of the steamrolling of the middle, working class. Instead of focusing on what Biden won't do. Let's be clear, he's left-center old school and is not going to suddenly in 4 years shift drastically from Clinton-Obama style, except on climate change, which he genuinely seems to want to make big push. So normalcy, climate change, and actual COVID response. That's a win. Starting work on getting the best possible Bernie-like candidate for 2024, and getting them out there now should be the goal instead of wasting time on what Biden won't do. Status quo Joe won't do that. I doubt he tries to arrest and have trials for all GOP members of Congress and the Senate who have helped Trump commit treason and steal from our country. At this point, I am losing hope that Trump's entire family and those in his business aren't arrested. Thousands need to go to jail for what they have done, not just these past 4 years, but for decades we're just learning about. The phrase "here and from the dawn of man, money talks." On rare occasions it's different. I can think of two, Gandhi and Mother Teresa. It never changes. The rich need the poor and in fact aim to keep it that way. For the life of me, we don't have a simple taxing system that works. A clean system. Any person below say 25,000 should get a tax handout. Anyone making less than 50,000 shouldn't pay. Then a gradual scale up into 33% for above 1 million. A separate contribution from every person, scaled accordingly, to specially pay off the national department. Corporations must contribute as well. And for God's sakes cut out the loopholes and corporate handouts. Keep it simple. Stupid applies here. Our current taxing keeps the rich, rich and the poor, poor. Enough. Yeah, that won't happen. It is partially the reason he is in office. Some of his picks are former lobbyists. I like how that is being left out. I am looking forward to when people get out of their place with him and he says, "Hey, you want the last guy? Do you?" and moonwalks out of sight. I think I read an incident where he snapped on someone already. No moonwalk though. I think that Reddit will underestimate how much people like this stuff. I talked to my parents that are so confused about how I don't like that the Lloyd Austin is tied to so many defense contractors because he's the first black defense secretary, and he's experienced. For me, I don't care he's experienced or qualified to hold the job. I think his training as a soldier is as good as American military training is, which from what I understand is top-notch from a technical level, but like I want my country to stop fighting wars period, and he won't do that. I've been with my parents a lot this year, and I have pulled them to the left quite a bit for older people, but in reality the older generation sees corp lobbyists as experienced people and not essentially salespeople for those companies that operate in government. He's literally the king of corporate lobbyists. What we need is legislation to prevent election interfering from corporations in the form of donations and whatnot, so all parties start at the same level. Get that money the fuck out of politics. But that is not going to happen, maybe ever. He can never hope to get the OAN or Parler crowd, but he can try to deal with the moderate right. Anything he does, even if Trump or Reagan did the same thing, will be labeled socialist and a threat to our future. I would prefer that he, and all the Democrats, don't try to make friends but instead let the results speak for themselves. It's hard when any policy change can take years, a decade, to be fairly evaluated. They need to put their heads down and implement their policies. No, don't dump them. Pass laws that restrict their influence and then dump them. Same with corporate donations. When you don't like the system in place, you have to change it. It isn't enough to refuse to use it while everyone else uses it to destroy you. I don't like traffic jams, but that doesn't mean I plow into the cars in front of me because I don't think they should be there and I refuse to support the traffic jam by playing along. What makes you think the traffic deserves my participation? This kind of obstinate wishful thinking has been one of the left's greatest weaknesses the last few decades. It isn't idealism, it's gullibility. The absolute last thing you can expect from Biden is for him to turn his back on the corporations and billionaires that own him. Once the Republican Party finishes grenading itself, the Democrats can quit pretending that they are anything but right of center and a real left-wing party can come up. Ha, yeah fucking right, just like that time the Hope and Change administration stacked its cabinet with corporate cronies after campaigning on a promise to do the opposite. Now correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Biden was the number 2 dude for the 8-year duration of that particular administration, and only a mere 4 years ago. Crazy that people seriously believe that the psychopathic ruling class actually gives a fraction of a fuck about the freedom and well-being of the working class, or uniting the country, whatever the hell that ridiculous marshmallow fluff blanket statement is even supposed to mean. Spoiler alert, Biden is going to fuck you over when you least expect it, probably in ways you won't notice because you aren't really paying attention, and you'll probably not even think twice because he's oh so soft-spoken and wears a blue tie, and his VP is a black chick who has come to recognize his virtue and sincerity, after nonchalantly backtracking on previous allegations of Biden's collaborating with racist political policy pushers, and tossing those pesky sexual harassment accusers to the side after having declared her solidarity with them, against Biden. To think that supposedly well-informed people seriously eat this shit up for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, and a sneaky midnight snack, I have to force myself to laugh in order to keep from crying. The only way to do that is to reform campaign financing and campaigning laws, because right now those lobbyists are the ones footing the majority of the bill for that ridiculous never-ending smear circus of ads the public is blasted with. Not to inform their choice but to scare apart and herd around. It's tragic that half of the representatives' time is taken up by panhandling for donations to finance themselves and their colleagues to maintain their posts and this dystopic idea of a fair and functioning democracy. Combined with ranked choice voting, America could actually dig itself out of this hole and find consensus to enact lasting change for the better instead of continuing to tear itself apart. There is an entire industry of lobbyists, consultants, and highly paid talking heads who keep pushing articles and messaging saying, "We still don't understand how 73 million voted for Trump. What is wrong here?" They know they answer, but that answer threatens their livelihoods, so they rarely say it out loud. He said what a lot of people on both sides think. He made a demon out of Washington, and everything surrounding politics. People hate Washington. They hate people in leadership. They believe that the people in power are inherently corrupt. And of the flip side of that, they actually believe only outsiders and the individuals continually sparring with leadership and the status quo are the only ones who aren't corrupt. It's a populist message that has no political leaning. It just happened to be coming from a guy running from the far right. And just because he's a narcissist, compulsive liar who as an individual and as a president embodies all the corruption as Washington, doesn't mean people didn't love hearing the message and voted for him specifically for their anger at Washington. They latched on to him as the outsider guy who everyone as Washington saw as a threat, and a threat to Washington was the best thing possible in their eyes. They ignored all his faults and lies because as long as he was threatening the status quo, they believed that specifically made him the right guy. If you're reading this and you think all of those 73 million people voted for him solely because of racist dog whistles, then go back to smelling Hillary Clinton's farts in your liberal fantasy world, because that is not what the reality of the situation here. Not saying those racist people don't exist is mass, but don't make the mistake of thinking that's the entirety of Trump's vote. Why do you think so many people still don't believe Trump lost the election? He didn't cause these people to not trust anyone from Washington or the national media. He just effectively roped all those people into his support structure. They were already so jaded that they think everything is a lie, and he just figured out how to use that to his advantage. This hatred of Washington is not going away. People are angry, and that don't believe anyone at the top of the power structure truly has their interest at heart. Going back to the way things were is not going to fix anything. A return to normalcy is just doomed endeavor. People on both sides of the aisle want fundamental change. Ordinarily, I would agree. But many of today's government leaders have never worked in the private sector. I think there is some danger that their total lack of knowledge about how all the nation's bills are paid could be a problem. Corporations have some legitimate points to make, points that average people mostly already know, but members of Congress may not. Leaders should get diverse opinions, including, but not limited to, info from business. For example, SpaceX on space matters. Microsoft or Reddit on computer matters. They know stuff the government may not know. But for the actual corrupt stuff lobbyists do, fuck all that. I say, make all lobbying public. You make a very valid point. Which leads to an official business panel that can advise politicians. It can be transparent who is on it and be forced to have set representatives from the vast layers of business rather than the few that can afford lobbyists. Have someone speaking for small-town businesses, farmers, franchise owners, Wall Street hedge funds, global CEOs, resource companies, etc. They all have valuable perspectives on any bill. Set and enshrine the size, funding, term, and other considerations that keeps the access to information and cuts off the money control. I'll never understand why the DNC and the liberal media is so obsessed with courting a party who would never extend that same olive branch. The GOP has never been concerned for a single moment with courting any Democrats. Hell, half of their identity is practically based on not being the DNC. It's so frustrating that time and time again the DNC must table any progressive agenda in the name of reaching across the aisle. Just goes to show that the DNC will never be a progressive party because it will always value appeasing the GOP over any meaningful systemic change away from neoliberalism. It is nothing but a fool's errand. LMAO. This is not happening. Do you not know how it works? They have politicians bought who you have never heard of yet. Only a matter of time they buy out AOC and the likes. They will never turn money down, and these companies have endless amounts given how much one policy change can make them over decades. There's another cynical way you can look at it. Take Cal Cunningham, the candidate who ran against Tom Tillis in NC. He ran on a platform of not taking any money from corporations or lobbyists. Then he got into an adultery scandal pretty close to the election and lost. Can we say for a fact that whatever industry he denied didn't have a hand in exposing the affair? Biden is an anti-progressive, pro-inequality corporatist based on his 40-year political record and because that's the only type of candidate the DNC ever nominates. Biden promised wealthy donors that nothing will fundamentally change. His administration will rigorously pursue the same policies as the Obama administration, which led to the election of a bumbling, incompetent authoritarian who, with the help of Republicans in Congress and state governments, and probably Putin, came very close to turning the U.S. into an authoritarian, theocratic country. Next time, the GOP will choose a competent authoritarian candidate who will probably win if the Democratic nominee is just another corporate Democrat. Looking to the 2024 election, now would be a good time to write a letter to the DNC where we pledge to vote for a candidate in 2024 with a solidly progressive political history, and if the DNC nominates another anti-progressive, pro-inequality corporatist, we will not vote for him, her. Instead, we will conduct a write-in campaign for an actual progressive. If we start getting millions of signatures now, perhaps the DNC will finally listen to progressives. Their choice will be to do what they always do and split the vote by nominating a corporatist, or they can nominate a progressive that most people will support. And if they insist on nominating a corporatist, who cares? We'll have a progressive candidate to support. Biden says the country is already united and doing great. He told a bunch of black people that they're not seeing things clearly because they don't appreciate the progressive insurance biracial commercials that have replaced the educational record players. If they maintain resistance and fail to fall in line, Biden will allege that these are not really black people. Jack. Biden has already stated publicly nothing with change. He plans to literally pick up where he left off in 2015 but with more say as the front man. More pipelines, more fracking, more oppression to applause. We have war hawks entering the White House. We will absolutely be entering more conflicts in the next 4 years, maybe even full-scale war. Obama took 2 wars and made 7 under Biden's gleeful watch. Biden, the self-proclaimed prostitute to credit card companies, not hiring a cabinet full of lobbyists, corporate stooges and the other corrupt politicians taking money from them? Not a chance. Dude is corrupt as hell and has been since having a segregationist as a mentor in the Senate when he was 27 and creating the private prison system for Republicans that keeps minorities as slave labor for businesses to contract out. Fuck Joe Biden. Dems spend 4 years going scorched earth against Trump. Now the key, in your opinion, is corporate lobbying. There will be no unity because you cannot do everything in your power to delegitimize a president, then turn and ask for everyone to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. There will be no effective lobbying reform because those in power do not want that. So in summation, if leftists want unity, how about extending some common courtesy when you are the party on the outside? Oops, too late. People seem to forget that Biden was the VP pick that Obama needed to show white suburban folk that he can reach across the aisle. What do you do when you run a black Democrat for president? Select a white corporate elitist to calm them down. Will he be better than Trump? 100% yes, that's why I voted for him. But I'm also not going to have my hopes up and believe that Biden will be the new FDR. If you want to unite the country, there are a number of things that are clear. Money out of politics with clear law and policies around campaigns and anti-conflict of interest. Get rid of the Electoral College and base all election results on popular vote. Tax reform that favors the average American and properly taxes the rich and corporations. A mandated living wage and extensive policy to combat poverty throughout the country, access to healthcare, justice reform and tackling racial issues in the country. He cannot do one without the other and succeed. Sadly, it is an all-or-nothing proposition to save the country. Why would he dump a major component of his power base? Journalists amaze me. Who cares what the citizenry lies about believing when polled? Voters love capitalism, and you're never going to successfully curb corporate power under capitalism. You won't even make a dent in their power. At worst, it'll go underground. Better to have it out in the open where we can at least see the rampant corruption.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. And if you are new, subscribe and click on the bell icon.